Look at that pre-talk. Fired up. You guys are fired up.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Meditative Monkeys Podcast. I'm your co-host, Ben.
I'm your co-host, Steven.
And in this episode, we're going to have a bit of a shorter one. We're just going to go one topic, go into as much depth as we can over maybe 20, 30 minutes and see where it takes us. So, Steve, what's the topic for today?
The topic today, let me see if I can word this properly. My brain's a little slow right now.
Sure.
As you might know, external factors. Creating fitness programs and being able to relay an idea of what fitness is to children and have them kind of understand the importance of their body even at a young age and start to instill that at a young age.
Yeah.
And in kind of intermingled with that, I think we're going to add in a little bit of technological effects on the physical structure of the body. Sure. And some things we can look out for, and maybe some cross correlations as to how technology and children growing up could affect them and their future bodies and everything like that.
Yeah. So we thought focusing on the importance of kind of cultivating a practice as a kid or when you're young, and then how your environment, and for us, technology is a big part of that, like how the environment might affect you and get in the way. So where do you want to start?
Maybe we can start something on sorry, I got cat interruptions. Maybe she's meowing at me. That's pretty cute. Whatever she's doing. Maybe we can start at a level of somewhere around. Can you hear?
Yeah. Wow.
Sweet girl.
She's having a chat,
animals. Hey? She actually probably knew we were on the podcast since we do this like every week, and she just finally got her time to shine. You gonna say hi? Okay, you gotta go now. Bye. Maybe cute. Something like starting on to like what it could mean to like how we can create, not, I don't want to say programming, like that's why I'm struggling right now with my sentence, because I don't want to say programming, but maybe
like how can we integrate it,
some sort of integrative structure where we can still keep it playful, but where we can have, still like learning points. You know what I mean? So instead of like creating like programming for a kid, maybe something along the lines of, remember we were talking about soccer that one time and how I had that idea of like having that freedom in the middle, but having 2 points of A and B, like where you have to be 100%. Maybe trying to create like some sort of, again, like let's go just even use program for now, like some sort of program that you can integrate where you can almost have like set goals, maybe throughout a day or something along the lines where you have a set point A and B and you let them be free in the middle, whatever that means. We can like kind of hone in on that and break and jump into that, and for sure jump in and add right now because I'm going to sip some water, but something along those lines I think would be beneficial.
Yeah. So maybe it would help if we start with the problem. Like the problem is something along the lines of that, the average person doesn't move enough or with enough variety, and that this is kind of essential for quality of life and for eventually things like self-exploration and self-expression and these sort of higher pursuits. And a lot of it comes down to habits of behavior, and it's not an environment. Yes, it's the habits are how we interface, we interact with the environment. It's through these habits of behavior. And it's not that you can get rid of habits, but that habits, it's more a bit about perhaps choosing your habits and choosing habits that are actually serving you, and recognizing that reality is this ever evolving thing. So your habits going to need to be updated regularly as well.
And recognize, I think also, whether positive or negative, what your habits are doing and what that effect is.
Exactly. Yeah. Paying attention.
You know what I mean?
Paying attention to. I think of it as: are your habits serving you, or are you in service of your habits?
Yeah.
Cool. Are you just?
I like that a lot.
Like, have you chosen habits that are actually
put
helping?
Put that in some simple terms.
Yeah. So it's like
for all of us.
Are your habits things that are helping you get to where you want to go,
Okay.
or is what you're doing in daily life entirely in service of maintaining your habits? Like, do you just have certain things that you do every day,
Okay.
and so all your energy just simply goes into maintaining those things? But at no
Sure.
point have you asked, well, what are these things in service of? So it might be
Yeah.
like you might have a habit of, I don't know, let's take something absurd like brushing your teeth, every time you walk past the bathroom. And it's like, if you just had this habit, then all this energy and all this time is going to go into every time I walk past the bathroom, I have to go in there and brush my teeth. It's a
Yeah.
ridiculous example, but go with me on it.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
but but if you just stopped and said, well, what's the actual point of this habit of actually, brushing my teeth? Well, the point is to keep my teeth clean. And,
Mm-hmm.
well, how often is it necessary to do that? Or maybe I don't need to
Sure.
do it as often as I am. So
Or is it detrimental at that point?
yeah, exactly. Am I doing it to a point where it's starting to
Yeah.
become damaging?
Sure.
You could use it for any example, but that formulation
Well,
of, are your habits serving you, or are you in service of your
sure.
habits?
Let's try and put that into context for regular life people, right? And like to give an example, I think in a real life habit, or a real life habit that we don't notice that we have, and that causes a lot of problem on the negative end, I think, is sitting so often.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
here's one. I'll make it slightly more specific, because I think this will make it a
Sure.
little bit more
Yeah.
interesting.
Of course.
That sitting is something that takes place in a chair.
Yes.
So that's my habit,
Yes.
right? My habit is, if
Yeah.
I'm going to sit, then I start look. So that means I'm now dependent on the environment, because as soon as I want to sit, I have to look for a chair. I have to find an empty chair. And then it
Mm-hmm.
also means that I contextualize sitting as this thing that only happens in a very
In a
specific
chair.
set of, in a chair.
Yeah.
Um,
And then I actually think, even to go in further, causes a negative reaction in the body, in a sense that you next correlate it with relaxation, right?
yeah, go on that.
And
Go
then
deeper.
the whole point, I think, that we want to kind of hone in on here, and especially to correlate with the children, is
Mm-hmm.
to kind of even teach people at all different levels that the act of sitting is just, it's a postural movement, right?
Yeah, sure.
And to correlate sitting with relaxation, you're no longer supporting your body in that structural position. And I think that's the biggest issue for us, because if you sat with proper posture for all of your life, would sitting cause you a problem? Of course. If you stood still for all of your life, it would cause you a problem. Anything we do sedentary is going to cause an issue. But if we sat and we were mindful of how we were sitting, how we could, stack our chains and be in a proper, best position that we can be, with, all the pre-existing negative issues that we have, all these things, then it won't be as detrimental. I think where the detriment comes is because, even though we're in a relaxed state, you still have to flex and move and create contractions.
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting to teach your body how to kind of function still at some sort of level with relaxation in a broken position. And that tends to start to become
And that's your new habit as well.
our set point, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it becomes so hard to break that, right?
Yeah. And what you're saying is that it's about being aware of these things, like being aware of your habits, and you're being aware of your body in the chair, for example. And I think that what causes the situation where you are in service of your habits is that is born out of a lack of awareness. When you stop paying attention and you go on autopilot, then you start living your life in service of these routines. You're just living in order to fulfill this program that's on a loop, rather than looking at those loops, those patterns, those routines, and asking yourself, how are these helping me get to where I want to go? Or even, where do I want to go? And like you always say, it's about asking questions, and you can't ask questions unless you're paying attention. And so all this being said, it's about recognizing that, look, if you want to get where you want to go, you need to pay attention to your routines, to your habits. They're not avoidable. They're just, you're either paying attention to them or you're not. And then once you're paying attention to them, you can start to decide, well, are these things helping me?
What's bad, what's working, what's not.
Yeah. Now the key thing about
information, right?
Exactly. And now the key thing about habits, and this relates to the importance of children, is the more you practice the habit, the harder it becomes to break it, the more deeply ingrained it becomes. And this is actually a physiological phenomenon.
And the earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. The earlier you start to ingrain it, the deep, and then because also the earlier you do it, that means you've got more time within your life to ingrain that habit. And this literally happens on a physical level. Like if you develop a new routine, you get a new synaptic connection, two parts of the brain get a physical connection with a chemical transmission of neurotransmitters, but basically new connections formed in your brain. And then the more you practice that, the more you do that thing, fatty tissue called myelin starts to build up around that wiring, that connection, and protects it and reinforces it, and it's protective, and it stops it from getting signals from other adjacent nerves as well, and adjacent synapses. So basically, the more you do something, it literally starts to like groundwork is laid down in your brain.
It's like more wires are getting built, and they're getting reinforced,
and then they're getting strong reinforcement and protective layers placed on.
And just to put that even in real life context, right? Like if you look at the quote unquote smartest people in the world and this and that, or just like smart people, a lot of them, if you look into like what the similarities are, they're people that like to ask questions and continue learning.
They're curious,
and that's always like, I feel like that's keeping just open-ended, just what we call them, neuron,
the synaptic connections in the brain, and then the neuromuscular connection is what between the brain and the body.
Right. And just even by always asking questions and even asking physically, you're always trying to create new connections. Like you're always trying to add to those fibers. You're always trying to add to that mapping of your body, right?
Now the other thing is, the less you do something, those connections start to break down and atrophy, just like muscles in your body. So the process of habit building is a process.
I don't think not that we do, but I don't think like people in general should separate the mind and muscle at all anymore.
Oh no, it's all you.
And the only way that we can even move a muscle is by literally energy signals from the brain. You know what I mean? So it's like through the nerve. So I think it should be talked about more. I think it's separated too much.
Yeah.
I think there's too much now in our world, and that's why I think kids need to learn it, because I think there's too much in like just like do this and you'll be okay. Where there's not even like just be mindless and you'll be okay.
So we're talking about abstracting, which is where you take kind of one aspect of reality and break it out and talk about it as if it's its own reality, as if it's separate from the rest of the whole. So, you could talk about the brain, and so you're abstracting this idea of the brain as if it's separate from the body and separate from everything else. And I think that's a useful practice to in order to have conversations, to think about systems, because it's very hard to talk about the entire nature of being at once. So you kind of
of course.
But then the trap is you forget that what you've done is actually an abstraction, and you need to reintegrate it back into the whole, because that's the way reality actually works. So yes, like we, as a culture, we get stuck talking about, we what can we learn about the brain? What can we learn about the body? What can we learn about these things in an abstracted, separated form? And we forget that we should
add it back to the picture.
We need to add it back in because that's the way it actually is. And we forgot
like Exodius and Yu-Gi-Oh, bro.
What's that?
You don't know? You know Yu-Gi-Oh?
I know Yu-Gi-Oh. Yeah, the
Do you
anime.
remember Exodius?
No, I don't know
the card game.
Oh, okay. I thought the card game was Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh was the card game, and then Exodius was the final boss that you can get, and it was all different card pieces: arm, leg, torso, head, and then if you got them all together, you basically won the game.
Yeah. Like Voltron,
you gotta bring it back, right? Like if you bring it all, if you understand that it is one, which I think that's where even like medicine, I think, are running into problems and stuff too, is like, and even like that's, I think we touched on even with physio and recovery. It's like everything is so separated, and I think we're forgetting that there is a point where we have to add it back to the picture, or understand how it's gonna fit back with the picture.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's great if it's like all those memes of the Game of Thrones, where like the first half of the horse is fantastically drawn,
that's the best,
and then the end it gets to a stick figure. Like you got to figure out how to blend it back to the body, or else it's gonna look like that. It's gonna be useless.
Yeah, if you get just too myopic and just focus on one aspect of reality and forget that reality is actually like all of this. Then you run into a lot of trouble. And you're right. You see this in the way we approach academia and medicine by extension, which is this emphasis towards specialization. And you end up with people who are extremely ultra knowledgeable and competent in a very, very niche, like ultra niche domain, but they fail to recognize how that domain kind of relates to anything else.
And just to give you the real life scenario that I've vented to you so many times about, is the one time I went to see that guy to remove my I have like cysts. I
I
have
don't
a
think it's called a
cyst,
cyst, is it? It's like a fatty deposit,
or
isn't
just
it?
like a fatty deposit, like whatever, yeah, whatever, like some sort of cyst, fatty deposit, whatever, like non-harmful at all,
Yeah,
nothing along those lines,
totally benign, but
totally benign. But and I have one on my tricep also, and I
mm,
actually personally feel like my connectivity with my mind muscle connection, there's an impedance that happens there at some
mm,
sort, and through my scapular tracking and all that stuff,
yeah.
I
And you,
find
you
that
you can't quite get your scapula into certain positions, right?
I can, and I find that it does skip, it like skips, and it's
Mm,
very like jammed up in that area when I try and like really squeeze in contractions. And
mm,
then when sometimes I like can pop into them,
mm.
like I can like really force my body into that
You
chain,
kind of
into
push it
that
out
like
of the way.
into that lock of the chain. And then after I get out of it, it's like severely sore.
Wow.
So I know it's getting in the way of
Of your
my
movement.
all my just my scapular just freedom and
Yeah.
my actual like muscular contractions in that area,
Yeah.
right? And again, this is coming from even years of, just even structured bodybuilding, just asking my body questions for so many years, playing soccer. Like I know my body, and I
Yeah.
go into this specialist. This guy is supposed to know so much.
What kind of specialist?
Just I guess he removes like a dermatologist, some sort of
Okay.
dermatologist.
So like a skin specialist. Yeah.
Yeah, but like super like veteran guy, old guy, right?
Yeah.
But again, talking about even streamlining too, even like in other aspects of life, about not asking questions. There's like smart people, but then if you stop asking questions, it's like you don't allow those, as you said, atrophy,
It's,
right?
it's, it's like it's like you're a piece of hardware that isn't doing regular software updates to
Exactly.
keep up to date with,
100,
changing times.
100%. I
It's,
actually even I use that as an analogy to say why even we're gonna have like as a generation a better time keeping up to date with like what's going on in the world than our parents and like their parents,
yeah.
because we're used to these consistent updates, like they've
Yeah.
been just instilled in us, right?
Yeah.
But back to the doctor. So I go see this guy, and this is where it all went south, by the way, and we laugh at this every time. He asked me to take off my shirt, and I'm explaining to him that I feel impedance, this and that. He tells me that it's surface, and it's basically all in my head. So I take off my shirt, and he goes, "Oh, you work out?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, how did you get those pecs? Bicep curls?" And when I tell this story to people, they're like, "Oh, this guy's just trolling you." And I'm like, 100%. I'm a troll. I understand trolling. I go, this man was 100% serious.
Yeah.
Now, now, just to give context, this is a guy that's supposed to remove stuff from your body and everything. You might be wonderful at doing that, but if you don't even know the proper functions of the body, how are you going to tell me that it's not? How are you going to tell me it's not impeding me?
Yeah.
I do this day in, day out. I'm asking my body questions. I'm putting my body through movements while I'm asking it questions to try and lock in those
You're
answers.
testing.
Yeah, testing, figuring out, just, data farming. And I've put my body into so many different ranges to ask that certain area of questions to see if it's an issue, and the one on
Mm,
my tricep. And honing in, I'm learning how to hone in on those areas more and more and have other contractions add to those contractions. And I'm finding more and more that it's an issue. And I had
mm,
this guy tell me, and I have a wonderful doctor. And when I told him this, because I talked to my doctor like this too.
mm.
Like I was gonna go with him to a TRT conference.
Wow.
I started talking to him about TRT last time I went in for shits and gigs. And he was actually telling me he was recently going to a conference, but because of COVID, it was actually canceled. But we were planning on going together. But I told him, and I explained to him why, and I gave him this full explanation. And he's a cool dude, and he's like very modern with like keeping up with the times. And he goes, "Fuck him, we'll go to someone else,"
Mm,
right?
good.
But it was just kind of odd to me that it's like this guy. If I didn't ask these questions, imagine people going in there with real issues that are getting turned away because they don't understand that they're having real problems,
Yeah.
because they don't know how to ask the questions, or they don't understand the feedback they're getting.
Yeah. There's a real
You
lack of
know?
it. There's a real lack of experiential understanding on how the body works in our
Yeah,
culture. And
of
and so
course.
And so to try to bring that back to the topic of kids, all this being said is just to say that, well, clearly, habits matter. Paying attention to your habits matter. The more you practice a habit and the earlier you started practicing a habit, the deeper ingrained that habit is going to become, and the harder it's going to be to undo it. So if you found yourself, working with habits that aren't serving you anymore, then that's going to be a problem later in life, because it's going to be really difficult to get through them. And so the problem is, or the question is, what could be done, or what could be done differently perhaps, to help establish better habits in children?
I would go the route of, as adults, as people with young children, get educated yourself on what ideas and what proper movement and just what proper positioning and what day-to-day life is required of, like what movements are required of the body they entail.
Yeah, so getting to the parents.
Get it into them, because I don't think it's a matter of teaching the children, right? Because
not teaching them like in an instructional way, perhaps.
No, but even to a sense of like, even teach them. Just thinking about it now, like you watch a child move, they're pretty like perfect. I think it's learning if parents knew themselves, because I guarantee you, with your child, you understand movement. So it's going to be less of you teaching him and more you being able to instill the proper movements that he can already do, and making him understand that they're right. Does that kind of make better context? Yeah. Does that kind of make sense? And just because like, for example, when he's going to be able to walk, I guarantee you he's going to have a perfect squat. So if you can kind of, again, not in like, I don't want to say some sort of crazy structure, like test subject way of like having your kid is like some sort of experiment, but I guess it always is an experiment in a weird way.
Yeah.
Right. But like, it's more of like being able to instill those proper movements, and like almost like even like talk to him while he's in them and be like, look, perfect. Wow. Look at you. Legs, and just touch them. Legs are perfect. So you're almost building those patterns with touch, with feel. But it's going to take parents getting educated on it, and you don't have to become a professional, but you just have to be able to understand what you can kind of see. And then what you're teaching your kid is how to be aware of his body, because technology is inevitable. And little raccoon, technology is inevitable, right? And especially in the future of your child's life, I love the fantasy of all these parents coming out saying, I'm not going to give my kid a computer, a cell phone, a tablet. You have to. It is what it is. But being able to educate, being able to have them understand how to reference their body and how that's going to affect them, and you having to learn that yourself, right? Because it's going to have to start somewhere. Right? It's going to have to start somewhere. Some kids are going to go out of their way, like me and you, to do this, but it is going to have to start on the masses, because we're getting more and more problems with health at younger ages as the years go on. We're seeing that. She's going crazy, but
it's doing laps.
It's I know she's just keeping fit, but it's going to have to start with some sort of parents' education, right? And I think she's going crazy, and I think making resources more available, but like proper resources, and having people be able to understand how to filter that is going to be the first step. It's going to have to start with some sort of parents somewhere, or
and I obviously I think about that a lot now. I've got a 6-month-old at this point, and I wonder if my theory in regards to movement development is that nature takes care of it for most of your youth. Up until a certain point, you don't need to add anything, or like you say, you don't need to teach necessarily in order for a child to develop. I think, when I watch, I think it's a very goal-oriented process. It's very interesting to watch my son, because he's driven by desire. Like he'll see a toy, and seeing the toy and wanting to play with the toy is what's inspiring him to attempt to like crawl, to go forward, because there's like a goal. It's goal oriented. So, and I think there are basically enough goals set up in order to just live and survive and to thrive. That nature takes care of most of your development. So therefore, the process is of
but I will say though, at that point too, though, you understand where you can set those goals, and you understand how you want to push him to have goals in a fun setting. As I know, even other parents, they have no idea it is important to have a kid. They know that the kid has to crawl and walk, but then they have the kid just sit all day and not actually play, like sit.
So I think that it's, the benefit can come through a process called via negativa, which was coined. Okay. I don't think it was coined by, but it was made popular by a writer, and I think he's an economist named Nassim Taleb.
Sounds familiar, actually. Funny.
Yeah, I would have mentioned it before, but basically, do you be talking about the black swans, the idea of the swans?
Yes. I remember a little bit. I don't remember too much in depth, but yeah, I remember we talked about the black swan.
Yeah, so he kind of popularized that idea too. But via negative is the idea of addition by subtraction, via negative, through the negative. Sure. So through addition by subtraction. So it's the idea that often you don't, benefits aren't necessarily found by adding something, but sometimes it's by taking things away. And often I think it comes down to a matter of efficiency. You only have so much energy. And if you think about it in terms of exercise, I think a lot of exercise development or movement development isn't so much about mastering a technique in terms of what you're adding to the technique, but it's rather taking away inefficiencies.
Sure. Taking away movement and trying to
get rid of unnecessary movement.
Yeah. Efficiency.
So that all the energy is directed in with an intentional way.
Clean it up.
Yeah. So because if you add at a certain point, if you're adding too many new steps before you clean it, before you take all the inefficiencies away, the whole thing becomes a fucking mess, right?
Yeah.
So with children, I think it's largely a process of via negativa. We're gonna where I believe that parents actually get in kids' way. Yes. And it's about getting in their way less.
Yes.
So giving them the opportunity
even from a mental development standpoint.
Yeah. So it's about not telling them to sit in the chair or to play with this specific thing or to do it this certain way, but rather
Can we break it down a little bit more? Do you think that comes from, again, a place of comfort from them, that they don't want their offspring to change because that's all they know? And it could be just their instilled habits, because if you're sitting in a chair all the time, it's just easy to have your kid in a chair. Like, your kid won't be in a chair because you won't be in a chair. And you won't be in, and even when you're in a chair, you won't be in a chair for a long time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And when you're in a chair for a long time, it's a lot easier to have your kid sitting down for a long time. And then eating junk and habits, right?
Yeah, because if you have a habit, like, let's take the habits of going to the supermarket and buying food.
Yeah.
Right. Assuming you do.
I have a good story about this too.
Like, it fucks with you when the fucking grocery store changes the way that the shelves are organized.
Lost.
I went to my local grocery store a week ago.
See you later. Yeah.
And the thing I was looking for was in a completely different section of the store, and I was wandering around like a headless chicken for fucking 10 minutes, and I was too stubborn to ask any of the service people for help, because I can figure this shit out. It's just a fucking oregano I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But it drives you nuts, because when I go to the grocery store now, like, you don't want to be intimidated by having to just find where things are. It's just, you want it to be as simple as, what do I need to get? And then once I know what I need to get, I know where it is. I walk in, I get it, I leave.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, if you're buying food and you're buying certain types of food for yourself, then you already know where that shit is in the grocery store. Like, it might be as simple as that. So it's going to, like, just that extra step of having to think of an extra thing that your kid's going to eat that's separate from what you're going to eat, or even changing what you're going to eat, and then having to find where that fucking thing is and create this new program, this new habit routine, or this new loop in your head, this new piece of software. Like, that takes so much energy. And like, it takes being aware, and it takes work, and it's a struggle, and you feel like it's not efficient and it's not smooth. So why the fuck would you bother? And then, so yeah, you pass it on, you pass that habit on to your kid just because it's easier than the alternative.
Well, prime example, I had a buddy and used to play soccer with the guy, and he tried to get fit, went into the gym for a little bit, started to get some results, got a little bit of that macho man mentality. I'm so great, hurt himself a little bit, never went back. Then his mindset turned to kind of, I'm going to give my kid healthy food and I'm going to eat whatever I want. Turned into, by what, like 1.5 licking like Cheeto dust off his fingers.
The kid.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
like it's just, it's inevitable, and it's tough. It's tough, right? Because unfortunately, it's like it's a hot, sensitive topic to talk about, and all this body awareness and everything, which I agree with to certain contexts. But it's like, we know school is tough, right? And I think it's like it's a disservice to talk about like to like loosely talk about like parenting and like feeding children unhealthy food and like, oh, it's the kind of like their decision. I think it's a problem. Like, I think it should be called out. I think it's a problem. I understand like social economic statuses and all that thing differ, but in reality, like, there's so many resources. If you just use Google and you say healthy food for cheap,
Yeah.
right? Like, there's alternatives. Like on Reddit the other day, there was a guy posting where, you can look at, there's a website that shows you how to make healthy alternative meals for a family of like, I think it was like 8 to 10 for like under $7.
Yeah.
Right? Like, is it going to be easy? There's going to be a learning curve, like anything in life,
Exactly.
right? But it's like, then you got to ask your question is like, what are the benefits from it? And I just don't understand how people can't look at the benefits from it and say, holy shit, not only is my kid going to live a life of, potentially not being, and I'm not saying every kid that is overweight or every kid that is obese gets bullied and all these things. I'm not. But we know that there is a harder time, not just getting bullied, but physically growing up, like being active, development of the brain, like all these factors from it. And it's like, if you just kind of decide to make yourself healthier and be a good example, that would just be passed on to your children from a movement standpoint, and just that, like, just that nutrition standpoint, right?
Yeah, you have to be the change that you want to see in the world, and like it's just on. I mean, it sucks, but that just seems to be the truth. That just seems to be the reality.
It's the math. It's the math. It's the numbers.
I mean,
It's at the end of the day, since we want to be like talking about like facts, right? It's the actual numbers. Like, you see it, right? If
yeah,
you look at like statistics, and I'm sure we can find some statistics, but I'm sure people that have, again, habits or that are obese, their children are more likely to grow up obese.
yeah,
We can look at statistics of people getting bullied in school, probably more obese. Habits of healthier families probably breed healthier kids, and I'm sure there's numbers for all of this. And I've seen numbers loosely for all this too, right?
yeah.
And it's just this logic too, right? Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, well, it's being the change that you want to see in the world, and
Yeah,
it's a shame that it would be great. It'd be great if your friend could eat Cheetos and his son would eat kale or whatever.
sure.
But
Right? It'd be great if I won the
it just doesn't seem. Yeah, it'd be great if you won the lottery, but it just doesn't seem to be the way of things. And you talk about being a teacher. I think the most important teacher you can be as a parent, especially, is a teacher through your behavior, through the way you act, rather than what you tell your children. And we see this with parents, where
let's put it into context with where some of these maybe like sports parents would understand, right? Like, you have a son that plays a sport and you want him to get better at the sport. What do you usually tell him to do? Go watch videos of your favorite player.
mm, mm,
Go. Why are you doing that? So you can see examples of how to be.
yeah, of course,
You gotta recognize that you're that for their life.
yeah,
And I think a lot of people don't, and then they try and teach kids a different thing, and it's like, you have to do it. We know this.
well,
You're trying to teach that to your kid, and then you do different. It's like crazy.
yeah. Well, you'd see it. We know it's true because you'll see it in like a supermarket with a parent yelling at their child to not throw a tantrum, and the parents there throwing a tantrum at their child about not wanting them to not throw a tantrum.
And or even funnier, goes to the cashier and throws a tantrum at the cashier.
Yeah. Then a second later, goes and treats other people like shit. Exactly.
Yeah.
Man, I think we're at your time limit.
I think we're running short.
You got to bounce, but I mean, this is one we could keep going on. But I think we covered some good ground there. We both got fired up.
It's good. It's good to get
good energy in this one.
Yeah, listen, it's personal.
Yeah.
Right. Like, at the end of the day, like, all jokes aside, it's personal for you. You're going through the process now. Are you going to do everything right? No. But again, I'm not like, I don't want to sit and we're not knocking people, but like, statistically, by you having a healthier background, you know, you're not gonna do everything right in teaching them how to be a good person or anything like that. You're gonna do your best, right? Hopefully that becomes, you know, perfect. But
you know what the difference is that I want my child to be a good person.
yeah.
And I'm not convinced that every
Yeah.
parent articulates that fully. I mean, I'm sure if you ask them, they wouldn't disagree, but I don't think a lot of parents actively think, I want my child to be a good person. I want to teach them how to be a good person. They're just thinking,
well,
I want whatever, like in some cases, I
just
want them
from
to just shut up and not annoy me.
from that generation though too, and it's kind of instilled in us, is like we I think it's a disservice to also not talk about being a good person, and to not talk, you know, everyone always says like, oh, you know, just do good deeds and don't say anything, you know, it's you just to know you did it. But I think there's so much bad that's talked about all the time, and done on purpose and talked about in a positive on purpose. I think it's like important now to like to be able to talk about like doing good things again,
Yeah,
for
to highlight and
in,
celebrate good qualities.
exactly, and in the right context too, right? Again, do I think taking videos of you handing homeless people food are good? To a certain degree, yes. Are they the right intentions to do it? Would I do that myself? Would I advise it? No, because I still don't think it's fully genuine. But again, like just to be a good person daily, to put yourself in other people's shoes, I think are so important. I think, as you were saying too, parents just don't even like do that in a weird way. And it's
You know,
just, I don't know.
just don't consider things in terms of like values like that or morality like
Yeah.
that. Like it's
Yeah.
just, in some cases, it's just purely survival. It's like, well, as long
Yeah.
as we put food on the table, then everything's okay. But it's like,
Yeah.
there's more to
Or just
life than
like,
that.
yeah, and just like it's like headlines too, right? It's like, oh, I just tell him to be a good kid, so he's gonna be a good kid, as opposed
Yeah.
to showing him, you
No,
know,
I think
or be a good kid, right?
no, I actually think a lot of it's not encouraging goodness. It's just about discouraging badness. So they'll say,
Sure.
you know, don't do that. Don't be a piece of shit. Like,
Fair
don't
enough.
steal. Don't be annoying. Don't bug me.
Yeah.
Don't bug your brother. Like
Yeah.
it's all the things we don't, which is fine. But the problem with like we talked about in previous weeks, the problem with growth and when you're oriented towards what you're trying to simply avoid is that your awareness is there. Your awareness is downwards on what I'm
Yeah.
trying to avoid and on the negativity,
Yeah.
and you don't have something that you're striving to be and to
There's no
become.
balance.
Yeah, there's no trajectory.
There's no
There's nothing to
balance.
aim for. It's just
Yeah.
don't be a piece of shit as opposed to strive
And
to
you're,
be
and
a
as you're
good
kind of
person.
saying, you're also highlighting just the bad stuff a lot of the times, and that's what it starts to become a pattern of, as opposed to like highlighting a lot of the good stuff, like, hey, good job, wow, you know, good kick, or
Yeah,
good
it's not
roll.
just less of that. It's also more of this, more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to bring that bar graph over to that centerpiece.
Because, dude, you're exactly right. I think about the way that men are talked about in a lot of mainstream media, especially. It's all about don't be like this, don't do that, as
Yeah.
opposed to what values you should be embodying and celebrating. You
Yeah.
don't hear that barely at all.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like your life becomes negatively oriented rather than positively
Yeah.
oriented.
Well, and I honestly, I used to shy away about saying stuff like, you know, like everyone likes me, and I used to think it was kind of like a bad thing, and it used to fuck with me a little bit. And I actually look at it in a positive way, in a sense now, like I hope to be an example, and even the people around me, and I'm not gloating, because again, I'm not. This is something I think should be standard. I'm not doing anything different. You know, I'm not doing anything that I think is above what zero is. I think this should be zero. I'm
Mm.
just putting other people's thoughts into context when I'm doing anything, and it involves them, right? Do I make mistakes? Sure. But even in those mistakes, I try and always put context, right? And I think that that's resonated with the people around me. And I think, yeah, it's important to say, you know what, people do enjoy being around me because I actually ask questions. When I say like, how are you? I listen, and I'll ask questions about how you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, as I say, I do it for selfish reasons too. I enjoy it.
Yep.
You know, call me selfish. I enjoy it because even my cousin gets angry. He's like,
But it's the best
bro, how
kind
do
of
you talk to
selfish.
people? But
It's the best
yeah,
kind of selfish because it's selfish that both serves you and the people that you're
yeah,
benefiting from,
everyone's
let's say.
winning, right?
Everyone wins, exactly.
Everyone wins. And like, I think that's when we can start getting a better world, as crazy as it sounds, is when everyone, you know, can win, and everyone can win, you know,
And, and, and I think it's important because it's something you can learn and develop, because if
yeah,
you think of yourself as, if you recognize that, look, there, I behave in a way that where
yeah,
a lot of people seem to like, enjoy my company and like spending
yeah,
time with me, then you can start to question and think, well, what are these? Because you're not inherently that. Like everyone can be a monster. Everyone can be an absolute monster. So you're choosing to embody certain behaviors and qualities that are giving you a positive outcome. So if you can look at it as, well, when I behave in a certain way, I get this great result. Well, what are these behaviors? What should I be focusing more on, and what should I be trying to avoid doing? What should I be doing less of?
And again, just like Ben was saying, like I'm not perfect. He's not perfect. Far
I never
from
said
it.
I'm not perfect.
Okay, Ben never said he was not perfect. I wasn't quoting. That was not a quote of Ben saying he's not perfect.
I'm not saying I'm not perfect, but I also didn't say that I'm not perfect.
He's right. I'm saying I'm not perfect. But like in that context, like again, teams win championships and they still lose games. You're gonna lose in life and you can still win. And I think when you can understand that, that's when we can really kind of get that double winning scenario for everyone, because there's a little bit of give and take and understanding,
Yeah.
It's like growth. It's growth, right? As opposed to trying to win all the time. Like if you just really try and understand the game more and put effort into being a good person, like you will win.
Well,
everyone wins.
Just a quick, I know you have to go, but just a quick little idea to finish on. I think that when we think about what it means to be good, I think there's a difference between choosing to be good and behaving good because that's the only way you know how to act.
Of course.
And I think when you recognize that you have a capacity to not be good, you have a capacity to be a monster, but you choose to be good nonetheless, I think that is higher level of goodness. Because it's an intentional goodness.
And to even give you a little bit more context of how I even personally think the physical learning has helped me, even with the mental aspect, and like even like that, just I would say like spiritual aspect, if you want to call it that, or that interaction aspect, is when I understood that I had a choice of how I could manipulate my body. Not that an exercise is going to manipulate me, that I had the choice how to manipulate my body at all times. That made me realize that you can manipulate anything at all times, right? And you can choose. If I can choose to sit up tall, I can choose to sit up tall. So I can choose to do good in every scenario that I can do good in, the best that I can, right?
Yeah.
Do I lose? And am I perfect posture all the time? Far from it, right? Am I a perfect person all the time? Far from it. But the more that you pay attention, the more you choose, the better you can be at all times.
Yeah.
And the more you're working to be better at all times, right?
I think that's
true.
Why
that's why I personally say movement is like so important at a young age, at any age, because there's so much cross correlation everywhere with it.
Yeah.
And like true movement, right? Like again, as I said, like I don't want to knock any sort of like fitness avenue or anything, but it's like trying to get a little bit more questioning out of the workouts, guys. Whether you're doing bodybuilding, strength training, aerobics class, start asking the questions of your body, of why you're doing this stuff.
Yeah, it's just being present as you're doing it,
there.
and
say, hey, meditative monkey.
and as Coach Tom Emerson in Canberra, who runs a fantastic movement facility, talks about a lot. I've been listening to him in some podcasts, but it's a key moment is when you recognize that my body is not a tool or a machine that I'm controlling. It's that I am my body. My body is me. And just that difference in perspective can just open so many doors.
Yeah. And again, guys, it's not a 1 second thing. It's not a one day you wake up, if you feel, this thing, it's not, you don't get to a point where you're like 100%, you're not perfect, but there is a feeling, there is a connectivity, even if you're not as mobile as someone else, but if you're paying attention, you start to feel that connectivity, that one, that venom becoming one,
Yeah.
the power. All right, let's call it. I have a wax appointment. I gotta get smoothed out.
Are you the waxer or the waxy? You're the waxy.
I'm definitely the waxy. I would not trust my fucking scare the shit out of me. Fucking see those reflexes though?
His reflex is like
a cat. He's a fat cat. The other one's skinny. He needs a diet, but he's like, power lifter styles. He has good mobility, so he's fine. I'm the waxy.
Cool.
Okay.
Good talk, man.
Benjamin,
Great to speak to you.
People.
This has been Meditative Monkey episode number 5. Short one this week. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Reach out to Steve at Steven_Zorbas at Meditative Monkey.
Day, at all day, every day.
Be good.
And at
Meditative Monkey.
Benjamin. Peace out.
And we're out.